For a brief moment in history, humanity left home. We crossed the invisible boundary between Earth and everything beyond it. We walked on another world, and then we stopped. For more than half a century, no human has traveled farther than low Earth orbit. Generations have grown up never seeing humanity venture into deep space. The moon, once a destination, became a memory. But now, that is about to change. Because for the first time in over 50 years, humans are going back, not to repeat the past, but to begin something far bigger. This is Artemis II, the first mission in a new era of exploration. A mission that will send astronauts farther than any human has ever gone, testing the systems that could one day carry us to Mars. 4 people, 1 spacecraft, a journey into deep space, and no room for failure. Because this time, we're not just visiting the moon, we're preparing to stay. To understand why Artemis II matters, you have to go back to the very beginning, not of Artemis, but of humanity's greatest adventure. In the 1960s, space wasn't just exploration, it was competition. The United States and the Soviet Union were locked in a Cold War, and space became the ultimate proving ground. Whoever reached the moon first would prove technological dominance to the entire world. Then, in July 1969, it happened. Humans landed on the moon. For the first time in history, a member of our species stood on another world. That moment changed everything. It showed what humanity could achieve when pushed to its limits. But what came next is just as important. Because after Apollo 11, the missions kept going. Apollo 12, Apollo 14, Apollo 15, 16, 17. Each one more ambitious than the last. Longer stays, more science, greater confidence. It seemed like humanity was just getting started. But then, it ended. No grand finale, no final speech, just silence. The last human footsteps on the moon were made in 1972, and since that moment, no one has returned. Why? Not because we lost the technology, not because it was impossible, but because the world moved on. Funding declined, political priorities shifted, and the urgency that once drove Apollo faded away. Instead, NASA turned its focus closer to home: the space shuttle program, reusable spacecraft, routine missions to orbit. Then came the International Space Station, a laboratory in space, a symbol of international cooperation. For decades, this is where humanity lived in orbit, close, safe, but limited. Because low Earth orbit is not deep space, it's just the beginning. And over time, something became clear. We hadn't finished what we started. We had paused it. Now, decades later, that pause is over. Artemis is not just a return, it's a continuation, a second chapter, in a story that was never meant to end. And Artemis II is the moment that chapter truly begins. At first glance, Artemis might look familiar: a rocket, a capsule, a mission to the moon. It sounds a lot like Apollo, but that's where the similarities end. Because Apollo was built for one purpose: to win a race. And once that race was won, the program no longer had a clear reason to continue. Artemis is different. It's not a sprint. It's an infrastructure. The goal this time isn't just to land. It's to build, to create a long-term human presence on and around the moon. Habitats, orbiting stations, sustainable systems that allow astronauts to stay for weeks or even months. And unlike Apollo, Artemis isn't going back to the same places. It's targeting the moon's south pole, a region never explored by humans. Why? Because hidden in the shadows of those craters, there may be water, frozen ice that could be turned into drinking water, oxygen, even rocket fuel. In other words, the moon could become a refueling station for deeper space missions, including missions to Mars. That's the real goal. The moon isn't the destination, it's the training ground. And before any of that can happen, NASA has to prove one thing: that humans can safely travel into deep space again. Not for a few hours, not in Earth orbit, but far beyond it, into an environment where, if something goes wrong, there is no immediate rescue. That's where Artemis II comes in. This mission is the test, the proving ground, the moment where theory becomes reality. Because if Artemis II fails, everything that comes after it is at risk. But if it succeeds, it opens the door to the next giant leap. The engines have cut off, the vibration is gone, and for the first time since launch, there is silence. Outside the window, Earth is already shrinking. Not dramatically at first, just slowly, steadily, with every passing minute. Inside Orion, the crew begins their first real task: adjusting to weightlessness. Pens drift, checklists float. Every movement is slower, more deliberate. This is no longer training. This is deep space flight. In low Earth orbit, astronauts are still held close to the planet, protected, connected. But Artemis II doesn't stay there. After a precise series of maneuvers, Orion performs what's known as a trans-lunar injection burn, a controlled push. That commits the spacecraft to the moon. There is no turning back. As the distance grows, something subtle begins to change. The sky gets darker, not nighttime dark, but absolute dark. A black so deep it feels almost unreal. And within it, stars. Not the faint points visible from Earth, but thousands, sharper, brighter, unfiltered. For the crew, this is one of the first reminders. They are no longer in Earth's environment. They are in space, as it truly is. And then, there's Earth. At first, it fills the window, cloud systems swirling, oceans glowing deep blue, a living world. But over time, it shrinks. From a globe to a sphere to something you could almost cover with your thumb. Hours pass, then days. Inside Orion, life settles into rhythm. System checks, navigation updates, communication with Earth, meals, rest, observation. But no matter how routine things become, there is always something extraordinary just beyond the glass. Inside Orion, it's quiet, not silent, but controlled. Every sound has a purpose: fans circulating air, computers processing data, occasional clicks as switches are adjusted. This is where the mission becomes personal. Because Artemis II isn't just a spacecraft, it's 4 people sharing a confined space. on a journey farther than any humans have traveled in over 50 years. The crew is led by Commander Reid Wiseman, a veteran astronaut, calm, precise, and deeply experienced. Every decision ultimately runs through him. Next is pilot Victor Glover, responsible for the spacecraft's trajectory and critical flight systems, methodical, focused, the kind of person you want at the controls when every second matters. Mission Specialist Christina Koch, a record-setting astronaut who has spent more time in space than any other woman. She brings not just technical expertise, but endurance. The ability to function at a high level over long durations. And finally, Mission Specialist Jeremy Hansen, representing Canada. A reminder that Artemis is not just a national mission, but an international effort. 4 individuals, different backgrounds, different experiences, but inside Orion, they operate as one. Daily life in the spacecraft is structured, almost routine. Checklists guide everything, from system diagnostics to communication windows, to basic tasks like eating and sleeping. Meals are practical, pre-packaged, carefully designed to avoid crumbs or loose particles. Even something as simple as drinking water becomes unusual, small floating spheres drifting until caught. Moments like this matter, because in a mission filled with pressure, small moments of curiosity keep things human. And then there's the connection to Earth. Mission control is always there, a constant voice, providing updates, monitoring systems, offering reassurance, even across hundreds of thousands of kilometers. That connection feels immediate until it's gone. As Orion approaches the far side of the moon, the crew prepares for one of the most unique moments of the mission: loss of signal. And just like that, they are alone. No voices, no guidance, no connection to Earth. Commander Wiseman continues through the checklist. Glover monitors trajectory. Koch tracks systems. Hansen verifies data. No one stops working, because this moment has been trained for over and over again. Outside, the moon's far side stretches endlessly. Rough, ancient, untouched. No human civilization has ever seen this directly from Earth. And now, 4 people are flying over it, in silence. As Orion moves behind the moon, something changes, not just inside the spacecraft, but outside. The familiar face of the moon disappears. Gone are the smoother plains seen from Earth. The far side is different, older, rougher, more violent. Crater after crater stretches across the surface. Massive scars left behind by ancient impacts billions of years ago. Some so enormous, they could swallow entire countries on Earth. For decades, humanity knew almost nothing about this side of the moon, because from Earth, it can never be seen directly. Hidden by tidal locking, the same phenomenon that keeps one side permanently facing our planet, the far side contains some of the oldest terrain in the solar system. Unlike the near side, where ancient lava flows covered huge areas, the far side remained mostly untouched, preserving billions of years of impacts. For a few moments, the crew simply watches. No one speaks, because some sights feel bigger than words. Below them, a landscape untouched by weather, oceans, or life itself. A frozen record of the solar system's violent past. Ancient impact scars stretching across the horizon. Mountains cast in permanent shadow. Craters that have remained unchanged for billions of years. And somewhere inside that silence, a realization settles in. They came here. Human beings crossed nearly 500,000 kilometers of empty space and reached another world. But Artemis II was never meant to stay. This mission had one final challenge left: getting home. With a carefully timed engine burn, Orion begins to pull away from the moon, slowly at first, almost gently, but with every passing second, Earth's gravity begins calling the spacecraft home. The moon is behind them now, slowly fading back into darkness. And for the crew of Artemis II, the journey home has begun. Orion now begins its long return across deep space. The spacecraft is still traveling at thousands of kilometers per hour, yet inside the cabin, everything feels strangely still, and ahead, Earth slowly grows larger. At first, just a bright star among thousands. But over time, the blue color becomes visible. Clouds begin to emerge. The shape of continents slowly appears. For astronauts returning from deep space, this moment is difficult to describe, because after days surrounded by darkness, Earth no longer feels ordinary. It feels alive. But even as Earth grows closer, the most dangerous part of the mission still lies ahead: re-entry, to return safely. Orion must slam into Earth's atmosphere at nearly 40,000 kilometers per hour, faster than a rifle bullet, fast enough that the air itself becomes plasma. Temperatures outside the spacecraft will rise to nearly 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to melt steel. Everything now depends on Orion's heat shield, the largest ever built for a human spacecraft. Inside the capsule, the astronauts begin final preparations. Loose equipment secured, seats locked into place, pressure suits checked. Every procedure practiced hundreds of times before launch. Then, gravity begins to return. At first, only slightly, a faint pressure against the body. But within minutes, it grows stronger. The capsule hits the upper atmosphere, and instantly, fire erupts around Orion. A blazing shell of superheated plasma surrounds the spacecraft. From inside, the windows glow orange. As Orion descends lower, the atmosphere thickens. The spacecraft begins a series of carefully controlled maneuvers, using the air itself to slow down. Outside, it looks like a meteor. Now moving slower through the lower atmosphere, Orion deploys its parachutes. First, the small drogue chutes, stabilizing the capsule. Then, 3 enormous main parachutes bloom above Orion. The violent speed of re-entry gives way to silence. Only the sound of wind remains. After traveling hundreds of thousands of kilometers through deep space, Earth is finally close enough to touch. The Pacific Ocean rises beneath them. Blue, bright, alive. And then, splashdown. Orion hits the water, ending humanity's first journey back to deep space in more than half a century. Inside the capsule, the crew waits quietly for a moment. No cheering, no dramatic celebration, just silence. the kind that comes after surviving something extraordinary. Artemis II was never meant to land on the moon. Its purpose was something just as important: to prove that humanity can return to deep space and survive there. Because this mission was never the end. It was the beginning of permanent lunar missions, future moon landings, and eventually Mars. For the crew of Artemis II, the journey is over. But for humanity, a new era has just begun.